Earlier today, Baldur's Gate 3 got its highly anticipated Patch 6 update. This was sort of dubbed the kissing update because it does include a plethora of new kisses, but even beyond that, actually several new romance features were added into the game, as well as a variety of very handy quality of life improvements. The patch was only about a 21GB download, but ended up requiring around 150GB of space to install for a lot of PC users, to the point where even Larian was like, hey, maybe you should just reinstall the game as opposed to trying to patch it. This update ended up getting a bit more anticipated than most, and even had several articles written around it, because fans had incorrectly convinced themselves that it was intended to release on Wednesday for Valentine's Day. And in turn, Larian had its own fair share of hilarious trolling. But looking at the update itself, while it was dubbed the kissing update, there were quite a few other changes to romance. That ending romance scene got updated for quite a few characters, so if after beating the game, your romance partner ends up sticking around, you'll have the scene in the Elfsong Tavern. In patch 5, you can see here with Lae'zel, we had a chat about our future, but with patch 6, even though all of the dialogue is the same, it actually opens up with Lae'zel walking away from the bed instead of just standing there talking to me. Lae'zel herself will now be wearing the elegant robe, making the whole scene just feel a bit more genuine and cozy. The intimacy is definitely raised as a result, and the scene previously ended with Lae'zel ordering you back to bed, but now you'll actually see this occur as the two of you walk back together, which ends things on this really nice heartfelt visual.
Tricks to show you.
This, of course, is just one example, but for the vast majority of these scenes, it's mostly going to be visual changes, different clothes being worn, or even just a nonverbal extension of the scene, with some characters actually having even larger upgrades as to what's going on here. And with Lae'zel specifically, there are actually several new endgame choices around her character. If you have romanced her, there's going to be a new option to join her in the rebellion. Typically, you could only do this if you were Gith yourself, but now anyone who's romanced Lae'zel can actually go for this really cool dragon ending moment.
Your heart flutters with excitement, aspiration, and even hope. The astral plane awaits. A rebellion takes shape.
If you haven't romanced her, this option may not be open to you, but there still will be a new choice, as now you're going to have the option to let her decide her own fate of either pursuing the rebellion or remaining here with us. In my testing, she would almost always fly away on her own, but one Reddit user actually picked this option and was in turn forced to go with Lae'zel, and in turn locking them out of all of the other ending options, which is honestly hilarious to me. You gave her the choice and she ended up taking you. It's likely there's some other secret choice or dialogue somewhere that'll affect what happens here. Several of these reflection scenes that occur on this dock also got upgrades. This will specifically apply to some of the characters that you haven't romanced. Although, honestly, I have no idea what the upgrades were. I've tested this on several characters, and all of it looks very similar to me. But there are also some new scenes in the epilogue itself. If you encourage Gale to become a god and also have an avatar Karlach or an avatar Astarion, they'll now have a unique interaction where they can ask the god Gale to help them with their affliction. I won't spoil what ends up happening here, but it is really nice to see this added. It's a fairly specific circumstance where you have both of these characters in their altered states, but it's also really cool and really immersive to see them being able to interact like this. But of course, the most advertised feature of this update was the new kisses. Now, when kissing other characters, there are going to be several variants of kiss that can trigger, and this is fully randomized, so each kiss may be slightly different, especially if you're kissing the same person several times in a row. Some of the new kisses are also tied to specific events or statuses for those characters, so if they're ascended or not, for example, that'll impact what type of kisses will occur, and these are incredibly well done. Each character I found to have several new kiss options. It's not like it was just one added choice, and many of these are designed with that character in mind. The sweet characters got even sweeter kisses, while some of the aggressive characters can take things to an entirely new level now after this update.
After all,
New cards are drawn, new hands are played, newcomers place above. A knave, a wizard, devil.
And even beyond just new kisses, there are further improvements to the kiss scenes overall, with a particular focus on height differences flowing better now. So if you have a tall and short character kissing, it should look a lot better. Although that isn't the only new way to show love for those around you with this update, what is perhaps the most important change to ever come to this game, you will now give Shadowheart a hug when she's upset after the events involving her parents. In the big picture, it's a relatively minor change, but this is a direct response to fan feedback, and for any of us who have actually played this, we know this is an absolutely gigantic and very important upgrade to this scene. But even beyond all of that, Larian also just added a new scene to one of the major quests in the game. So now there's a new cinematic scene to support the combat encounter that'll occur after you choose to side with Nightsong. Several characters in the game get totally new camp idle animations, so they'll do something beyond just standing there looking aimlessly. I got a couple of these to appear, but after spending way too long testing these and trying to get them to trigger, it definitely seems like there's some oddities. For several characters, I just could not get them to do their new idle animation, and there are even some new specific interactions like Shadowheart reacting to you sitting on her stool, but this too I wasn't able to trigger. There are some huge quality of life changes with this update. When asking an NPC to join your party, it'll now automatically prompt you to dismiss a party member if your party's already full. So instead of having to run back and forth between characters trying to dismiss people and then recruit other people, you could handle it all at just one party member as you try to recruit them. You're now able to dismiss party members at nighttime. Another really small but nice touch in the epilogue, camp party members will now have titles under their name to reflect whatever just happened. So if in the period between the end of the game and the epilogue they did something, you'll see that reflected now, which is really cool. With patch 6, you'll now be able to switch to a custom difficulty mode mid-playthrough, as long as you aren't playing on honor mode. So you could freely customize things to make the game easier or harder, and you could change this multiple times over your playthrough. And I feel like in practical terms, this may end up being one of the biggest changes from this update. Many of you are dumping hundreds of hours into single save games, so starting over just to try this new mode wasn't really an option, and now you can. Perhaps you want to make the early game a little bit easier, but then the mid to late game a bit harder once you actually get some of your builds going. They also improved automatic character selection, so entering dialogue, the game will now switch to your tab far more often. So instead of one of your companions or other party members doing dialogue for you, you'll actually be doing dialogue the vast majority of the time now. The trade interface got a giant quality of life change. Now when trading, it's completely clear who is actually doing the bartering, whose stats this is relying on, and you'll see what those relevant stats are and what kind of discount you are getting from that character. Even further, you'll now have access to your party's entire inventory. These will each be sectionalized so you can switch between the different characters' inventories and trade any items that anyone has. The camp inventory UI will now account for camp chests as well, so any of the various chests you have scattered around your camp will pop up here, making it so you basically don't have to move to do inventory management anymore, which is gigantic. There's a new interface option to change the text size in books and other legible items. If you long rest and only use alcohol to fund that, your entire party will get a new hangover debuff for 10 turns. This will give you a disadvantage on charisma and dexterity checks, and honestly it's pretty minor. It probably won't impact you in gameplay most of the time, but it is fabulously funny. And there were some genuine improvements to auto-selecting camp supplies as well. Your resources will now be used more optimally, and auto-select will be able to pull camp supplies out of the inventories of all of the members of your party. So if you have a bunch of food stuffed into one pouch, this will now be able to detect that and use it. Group hide now works on all party members controlled by the player, including followers and summons. The elixir of hill giant strength now applies its effects when thrown, if you can throw it. Unfortunately, this was not working for me. I tried numerous times and I cannot throw this on the current build. Thankfully, with this update, there were a ton of bug and stability fixes. Some of the issues with autosaves not uploading correctly were further resolved with this one, and even some of the Xbox crashing issues around the start and end of a session were resolved. But perhaps most important of all, they finally fixed Shield Bash and Rebuke of the Mighty not triggering saving throws. So now these will once again come in clutch during combat, and it genuinely makes a big difference. If you've been playing a bunch of hours on patch 5 and earlier, you'll probably almost immediately notice this change when you start playing and get into your first combat encounter. And Gortash could finally be heard. Previously, some of his voice lines were silent, but now they are properly voiced and you could hear them. Beyond this, there were a ton of other smaller changes, bug fixes, and even just general quality of life improvements. But hopefully this video gave you a look at some of the big things that were changed from this update. And if you are just getting into Baldur's Gate 3, check out this video where I show you some essential hidden features that you should be taking advantage of.